Hi, everyone. It's Kate Kay with the Afghan EVAC Coalition's Resilience Team. We are filming another session of our Fireside Chat series. And today we are really, really lucky to be joined with Dr. Kavitha Reddy, who I will allow to introduce herself.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me, Kate. Nice to meet all of you. I'm Kavitha Reddy. I'm an ER doc by background, trained in integrative medicine and health, and I am the Associate Director for Employee Whole Health within the Veterans Health Administration. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, see, everyone, just so you know, this is how I came to meet Kavitha, is that I cold emailed her on her work email, and she generously offered to host a session on something that is really important for our resilience, especially given that we're seeing that this is going to be a really long-term mission for us, which is on self-compassion and gratitude. And so, Kavitha, I had given you a lot of kind of leeway in what session you wanted to host, and this is the one that you really grabbed onto. So I'm curious what it was about this topic that you felt would resonate.
Yeah, it's interesting. So being a healthcare worker, especially over the last couple of years, we've been looking at how we could support each other as we do this really critical work. And for your community, even more acute critical work that's happening day in, day out. And what's interesting when you look at this is that when you measure actual resiliency of healthcare workers, and I would imagine all of the folks on this call too, it's actually quite high when you look at the resiliency scales,
Okay.
meaning many of us know how to adapt to challenging circumstances. We have skills that we know how to use to cope with adversity. But time and time again, when they looked at several indices for these folks, for all of us, self-compassion always was the lowest of the domains for all of us.
Okay.
And so it strikes me that this is actually a skill we can develop over time and actually prioritize. And even more so than talking about some of the other self-care practices, this can actually be one that maybe protects us even more as we do the hard work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like, especially with the group of people in Afghan evac, they're so compassionate. Like that's what's driving the work, right? Is that
Yeah.
they really want to impact other people, and then kind of our own self-awareness, we kind of put that to the side. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, we just have to keep going, and
Yeah.
without much thought as to what that really looks like, right? But we're in this kind of exigent circumstance, but it's going to be prolonged.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about the work of this coalition, like what would that self-compassion look like?
Yeah, so let's break that down a little further, right? So when I talk about self-compassion, you're right. We have this enormous ability to be compassionate to other people. What also happens is when situations aren't aligned with our values and morals, we can feel significant moral distress, if you've ever heard that term.
Yes.
And really what that means is here you are trying to do good work for
Yes.
really people who are suffering, but the systems around you, the barriers, the challenges, they get in the way of you being able to do that work. What happens in that moment of moral distress is that you then may feel, I'm failing. I'm not doing the best I can. I'm failing somebody else. Or worse, somebody suffers or doesn't make it. And then you feel this enormous weight. On all of those moments where things don't go according to plan or to your values, you have these moments of, well, it can be self-deprecating. I am the issue. I am the problem. I am the one that's not doing good enough. And this is where that self-compassion thing comes into play. Many of us are type A. Some people might be perfectionists. And so when you don't hit that very unrealistic bar, because there is no such thing as perfect, the toll is really on you. So here's what I think is important. Like, just use this example. The last time you met, you made what you thought was an error, because we're human beings, we make errors. What was the kind of language in your mind at that moment? Were you saying to yourself, gosh, I can't believe I did this. I'm an idiot. I messed up. I let that person down. I'm a failure. What are the words going through your mind? And that's when you start to recognize that our ability to have self-compassion is actually quite low.
Yes.
But it is something we can now start to recognize. And that's where the gratitude and the forgiveness come into play. In those moments where we're doing the negative self-talk, we can flip the script and start to say, now, wait a second. Would I ever say that to you, Kate? If I heard you saying that about yourself, I'd say, shake it off. No, it's all right. You're fine. You're a human being. You make mistakes. We get up. We stand stronger. We actually are so much kinder to somebody else that might make that mistake. So that's the switch we have to flip in order to dial self-compassion up.
Okay. It's so interesting because I have a tendency to definitely talk down to myself in those moments. Like I can be really hard on myself. And I was thinking about it, and I was, to me, it's one way that I can feel like I am maintaining some semblance of control over the
Mhm.
situation. Is if it doesn't matter if I'm speaking down to myself, if it still makes me feel like, well, this is your fault because you still have some authority here. And when
Mm,
you're dealing with that moral injury piece where we're feeling so failed by all of these systems around us,
right.
that kind of feels important. So, how would you guide people to kind of keep that sense of autonomy and to
Mhm.
still feel empowered, but in a way that's a little bit more positive? Does that make
Well,
sense?
you use the exact word that I think is important. We talk about it a lot with our whole health approach, whole person approach, and that is to feel empowered and equipped.
Okay.
So in those moments when you might feel, I'm feeling some distress in this situation, the system is not allowing me to help as fast as I want, it's okay to step back and then say, but I am a human being. I'm doing as much as I can in this moment. Notice what you're grateful for around you. What are the systems that are actually working? Are there people? Are there communities? Are support services? Are there your colleagues? What is going well in that moment that's making the situation go okay? And how do you dial those up when other systems aren't working? The next thing is it's okay as a community to elevate the system issues and say, hey, I think we could be more efficient. We time and time again are seeing this barrier. We are all elevating it as a system issue. And then that's true empowerment and engagement when you as a community can say, hey, we see how we can do this better. This is really getting into that heart of root cause analysis, right? Like,
Right.
so everybody is feeling like they're not able to make a certain issue work. Let's figure out how we can problem solve that together. So that's kind of a systems thinking. But on a personal level, flipping the switch of saying empowerment is really about feeling grateful for what's working, being able to forgive yourself and being able to get right back up and say, okay, let me think of a new or different way I can do this in the acute situation to
Okay.
get past it. And then we can look at the system issue together.
Okay. So it sounds like, part of the reason we host these series is that we're trying to give people more tools in their toolbox to say, this is how you can get through these situations. So I'm hearing a lot about flipping the script and changing the way that you can sort of speak to yourself internally. Do you
Correct.
have any other tools or tips for people that can just kind of help them exercise that muscle until it becomes sort of second nature?
Absolutely. So the first is to even notice when you're doing the negative self-talk. People can go throughout their whole day and do it all day long, and actually feel kind of deflated by the end of the day and not really know why. So the first thing is to notice in those moments of having that negative self-talk. The second then would be positive psychology practices. And so these are where you're able to say, again, I'm a human being. I made a mistake, and I have the choice in how I emotionally react to myself. This is
Okay.
not automatic. I can retrain the brain. And when I hear myself saying that to myself, I'm going to flip to what are 5 things I'm grateful for about
Okay.
myself? What are
Okay.
5 things I'm grateful for about myself? And then you can even say, what are 5 things I'm grateful for about my community or my team?
Okay.
And you've now brought yourself into a positive state, which is just as contagious as a negative state.
Yeah.
So notice when other people are doing it around you too, and help them flip the script on their negative self-talk. When you hear them saying,
Interesting.
I
Okay.
failed, or I did something wrong, or I'm really feeling down, debrief it and then say, okay, what are 5 things that you're grateful for, that you do well? And you start to make that a practice throughout the day. And it really contagious is the best word. We can really keep that positivity around us in a very trying time.
That's interesting. I guess I never would have thought that your success in this realm, for lack of a better word, but could really revolve around engaging other people in this.
Yeah.
Because for me, when I'm having those really negative thoughts, of course, I'm like, I don't want to share that with other people or they'll see that I'm failing, right? But
Ah, right.
it is so much easier for me to validate someone else than it is to validate myself, that it makes sense that in my low moments I could go to someone else and say, okay, like little exercise time, like what are some of these things that we can combat in here? That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. You just reaffirmed what I'm saying, right? We
Yeah,
are so
yeah,
compassionate to others making those mistakes, but not to
yeah,
ourselves. So
yeah.
that is really noticing in each other. And actually, you guys might know this in your community already, but Operation Stress Control, psychological first aid, stress first aid. These are concrete tools that have been taught within DoD and within National Center for PTSD
Okay.
and within VHA. And really what you're doing is you're helping people understand and see stress in the people around them. And then the compassion becomes, hey, I notice you seem a little bit different today. Your body language is a little different. You seem a little down. Are you okay? And then if we all as a community can say to each other, real courage is about being vulnerable. Real courage is about saying when we've made mistakes and debriefing that trauma. Otherwise, it affects us physically and mentally.
Right.
So this is, again, how we support each other. You had a rough day. Let's talk about it. And where I hear you saying it's all your fault, let's talk about that too, right? Because the system is not easy. And if you did make a mistake, what is it we can do differently so that we don't make that next time? This is really what we talk about for psychological safety. We got to get to a place where we're all able to bring this stuff forward, and then the self-compassion can come after that.
Okay. So we've hit the self-compassion bit a little bit, but I know that you had also said that another good thing to focus on is gratitude.
Right.
So just for anybody who just, would you be willing to highlight, like, this is the difference between the self-compassion and the gratitude and why it's important that we do both?
Yeah. So gratitude is really this deeper understanding that even when things may not be going well, maybe when we feel like we don't have all the pieces perfect, that we still can become grateful and be grateful for what we have in our life. Because the truth is, we're alive and we're here and we're with each other. And I mean, my goodness, the work you're doing is in service of such a powerful, powerful message, right? And mission right now. But what happens from a human nature is that we're really trained mentally to look for the threats. We're always looking for what might threaten our safety, right? What could hurt us, what could sort of deflate us, what could even kill us, right? Considering the environments we work in. So the problem is, over time, we became more evolved. We have a lot more things in place that keep us safe. We're not the same as we were to our ancestors, centuries ago, where you had to really be always thinking about threats. So that means we have to actually work in our mind to recognize what is helping us and what is good.
Okay.
And that's where the gratitude comes into play. So you could be having a really terrible day. Things seem like they're not going their way. But what are you still grateful for in that moment? It could be your family. It could be your children. It could be the memories of people that have come before you. It could be your strength, your physical, your emotional strength. But if we don't stop to call those out, we tend to live in this place of imminent threat and risk all the time. And that depletes energy mentally as well.
Okay.
The last thing I want to say about that is, when you give gratitude to people or for people, it also comes back to you even in a greater way. If you've ever noticed how you feel when you give to a charity or when you volunteer, or you give a present to a loved one, you feel this warm, really wonderful feeling, because truthfully, there's actually dopamine that's being released in your body. It's a feel-good neurotransmitter. So biochemically, we feel better when we show gratitude to other people.
Okay.
And yet we don't do it enough.
Okay. So it sounds like you're drawing a distinction between feeling gratitude for the things in our life and then also expressing it to other people.
Correct.
So we should try to be sort of striking a balance between both.
Yeah. And think about this. Most people stay in their line of work and stay with their teams because they feel valued by that team and valued by the organization.
Yes.
And so this is where gratitude, if you know how people feel valued, showing them that value, showing gratitude can be immensely helpful for keeping people engaged and morale high. So gratitude on one hand really keeps that culture of well-being. And then the self-compassion is your own personal endeavor to be kinder to yourself. And you could say it's about feeling grateful for yourself, but it's really about showing yourself compassion when you feel things are not going well. Versus gratitude, which is really about saying these things are going well, and I want to point out that they are going well instead of living in this imminent threat sort of domain.
Okay. You're correct in guessing that I do, volunteer with a lot of type A people. We're very evidence-based, right?
Yes.
And so we can look at this and say, yes, there are definitely people who we have evacuated who are safe now, right? And we did that work. But for every one person who we were able to relocate, there's hundreds of others who we haven't yet. And it's really hard to sort of do this A and B comparison, which I think we're really prone to doing.
Right.
So one of the things that we had also suggested to our volunteers, and I'd love to know what you think about it, is to have some sort of a physical reminder of something you feel grateful for. So we encourage our allies to send pictures when they, arrive in the US, or, to save text messages about, something that makes them feel happy. Do you think that's actually a helpful approach, or is there something else that's a little bit more definitive that you think is more helpful?
So I absolutely think that's a helpful approach. I always say to people, as an ER doc, I don't get to see the outcome of a lot of the work that we do, right? Because I see them for, a brief period of time, and then they either leave or get hospitalized. And
Right.
what goes a million miles for many of us is the thank you from the veteran who actually says, hey, thanks for taking care of my family, or thanks for taking care of me, because then we know that what we did meant something. So I think what you're explaining, to see the outcome and the impact of the work you do, is remarkable. The other thing I would add to that is ask people in your community what would make you feel valued, because people feel valued differently. People feel great gratitude differently. For some people,
Yes.
it may be that picture. For other people, it may be something else. But simply asking, how do you feel appreciated? How do you feel that people are grateful for you? Quite honestly, for some people, it's a certificate. For some people, it's being honored in front of the group. For
Yes.
some people, it's an email. For some people, it's a picture from the families they helped. And one thing I want to note is, it may seem that only one out of many are getting saved, but the truth is, you are making an attempt to help all of those people. And if it weren't for you, there would be nobody helping those people, right? And so that's the gratitude and the self-compassion we're talking about.
Okay. That's really helpful advice, actually, because it kind of speaks to that same notion of love languages, which is that
Right.
not everybody
Yes.
receives love in the same way. And for some reason, it never crossed my mind that it's the same thing when it
It's
comes to
exactly the
gratitude.
same. Exactly
That's
the same. I bring
that's
up
so
that book quite
interesting.
a bit. Right.
I love
You
that.
could
Yeah.
be you could be showing gratitude to your team and workforce, and they may not be receiving it because it's just
Yes.
not the way they communicate. Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Exactly.
So, Kavitha, we've done the self-compassion and the gratitude pieces. Is there anything else that you want to make sure we cover in the session?
Well,
Because we're
I just
just
wanted
about
to
at the
say,
end.
yeah, sure. I just wanted to say, so this is what I've learned as the healthcare worker. Again, there's a lot of system issues that happen, but where can I feel in control? Where can I feel empowered? And so that's why I come back to self-compassion and gratitude a lot, because I can control
Okay.
how that happens. But one more thing I want to bring up is that I often see, especially with our veteran population, forgiveness being hard, because there are things that you have to do in the nature of the job that may conflict with your values and morals. And
Right.
the truth is, forgiveness, we know from an evidence-based standpoint, when you harbor that sense of wrongdoing, it can affect you physically and mentally. It does create sort of a fight or
Yes.
flight response in you constantly. And what forgiveness does is allow you to move past that and to really heal. And so I would encourage anybody that's still harboring that sense of wrongdoing and fault, to think about the work of forgiveness, forgiving yourself, which really goes hand in hand with the self-compassion piece. It is very therapeutic, takes time, but we have to give ourselves permission to do that, I think, in order to really
Yeah.
heal.
So, for someone who's just starting, for someone who's never once thought about how to exercise that forgiveness muscle, like what would that sound like in their own head? So it's day one and they're like, oh my God, Kavitha and
Yeah.
Kate said I should try this. What would that
Yeah.
sound like?
Well, I think really, again, it comes back to noticing when and how you're doing it. And so I would recommend even some sort of journaling. If you're not a writer, you can even just record it into your phone,
Okay.
and start to really say, what are those inner thoughts that are happening in your head? Go back and read it and listen to it and note where the negative pieces may be, where you
Okay.
may be saying, not being forgiving to yourself, where you may have negative self-talk, and where you may not be expressing the gratitude that you feel. And those are, again, not, don't fall into the trap of then getting hard on yourself that you're doing
Right.
that. It's really just about exposing and noticing it so that we can then start to become aware of it even more. And then slowly over time, you can flip that switch.
Okay. Well, Kavitha, I'm super grateful. You've been so enthusiastic about participating in
Oh,
this, and
yes.
it made me feel energized. So we're just at the end of our time. And I like to ask this of everyone, but if you could just leave our viewers with one message, like what would it be?
Well, the biggest message is that you are all heroes for what you're doing. And there's a reason I wanted to be a part of this with you.
Yeah.
So let me just tell you that I am extremely grateful for what you're doing. It means a lot to all of us. And, when you find yourself feeling like it's a hard day, just know we're all thinking of you and supportive of the work you're doing.
I don't know what I thought you were going to say here, but that wasn't it. And I can feel my heart actually like warming up a little. Like it's
Oh,
hard. It's hard in this field, because you
it
you
is.
want to feel recognized for what you're doing. But so I
Yeah,
really appreciate that, Kavitha. So
of course.
I'll end the recording right now. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.